Hi, welcome to another WP Content Crawler video. We'll take a look at what's new in version 1.14 of the plugin. We will create the site settings in 30 seconds with config helper, translate the post content multiple times, translate IMG elements attributes, move elements, use JSON fields values in the filter conditions, embed social media posts by checking a single checkbox, convert JSON data to HTML automatically and by defining our custom templates, retrieve the current temperature from a free API, generate a featured image via OpenAI's DALL-E model, and get related products from eBay and insert into the post content. Let's dive in. Config helper is a dialog that is shown when creating a new site on the plugin. It is designed to greatly reduce the initial configuration time for a site. Let's start by adding a new site. The config helper contains a few steps. The first step is to enter the URL of a category page. So we need to enter the URL of a page that lists post URLs. Let's enter the URL of the best-selling WordPress themes page from Theme Forest. So our goal is to crawl themes from Theme Forest. Let's enter the URL and click the next button. In the second step, we need to find a CSS selector that finds the post URLs on the category page. Let's do that by using the Visual Inspector. We simply click one of the themes shown on the page and all the theme URLs are found. We can see the found URLs here. The URLs seem to be correct. If they were not, we could use the delete button shown in the row to delete them. Also, we could unselect the row to exclude the found URLs. There is no need to do any of these for this example. Each row corresponds to a configuration. For this example, each row specifies a CSS selector that will be assigned to the post URL selector's setting. Since we are happy with the URLs, let's click the next button. In this step, we need to enter the URL of a post page. It is automatically filled. Let's see the next step. This step tries to find the lazily loaded images on the post pages. The config helper works with at most 3 post URLs when it tries to find CSS selectors, to make sure the found CSS selectors work for many posts and not unique for a single post page. Here, we can see that this step identified many lazily loaded images. Let's keep this row selected and go to the next step. In this step, there are many rows that are already selected. Again, each row corresponds to a configuration. These configurations are typically made for a site, so they are already selected. If you do not want them, you can simply unselect their rows. The descriptions of the configurations are self-explanatory. Let's not change anything in this step and let's see the next step. This step is used to find CSS selectors for the post title. The config helper tries to find CSS selectors automatically by analyzing the page's source. As you can see, it already found the title. If it was not able to find it, you could use the Visual Inspector button shown at the bottom of the dialog to select the title manually. The found titles seem to be correct, so we do not change anything in this step and click the next button. This step tries to find CSS selectors for the post content. As you can see, the source code of the post pages are analyzed and the contents are found. You can click the shown HTML code to preview it. Since the content is found correctly, let's go to the next step without changing anything here. This step tries to find CSS selectors for the featured image for each post. The featured images seem to be found correctly, so there is nothing to do in this step as well. Let's go to the next step. This is the last step of the config helper. It presents you with a few configurations, such as enabling the automatic crawling and saving all the images in the post content. I do not want to save the images in the post content, so let me unselect it. Also, I want to add the source link to the post content, so I select it. To complete the config helper, let's click the complete button. When we do that, the site will be published. The basic settings for the site are ready now. If you want, you can further customize the settings. Let's wait a few minutes for the site to be crawled and observe the crawled posts. Because I explained each step, it might have seemed to take a lot of time to create the basic settings via the config helper. In fact, it took about 30 seconds to create the basic settings, so the config helper greatly speeds up the initial configuration. Okay, let's see a few of the crawled posts now. Now, let me show you what the config helper did with the site settings. It configured the site URL and the active for scheduling settings. It defined a category URL to the category URL setting. It also configured the test category URL and the post URL selectors settings. It configured the test post URL, the post title selectors, and the post content selectors settings. It also configured the featured image section. To make the lazily loaded images not lazily loaded, it defined HTML manipulation options. It also enabled the Convert JSON to HTML automatically setting and defined many unnecessary element selectors. It defined two filters for unwrapping the form elements and no script elements. It configured the post content template to include the source link. It enabled the embed social media posts and other media, the remove empty HTML elements and comments, and remove scripts settings. Finally, it defined unnecessary element selectors for the template to remove the styles and style sheets. You can change these settings if you want. The config helper just provides you with an initial configuration. You are free to change the settings in any way you want. There are two translation commands added to the filters. Let's start with the first one, which is translate command. It is available for the post subject. It is used to translate the post parts into one or more languages. In the languages option, you can define multiple language pairs. The first one is the from language, while the second one is the to language. You can enter many language pairs to translate the content multiple times. The translations will be applied in the specified order. For the fields option, if you do not select any field, all the fields of the post will be translated. Otherwise, only the selected fields will be translated. The second command is translate element attributes command. It is available for the page subject. It is used to translate the attributes of the elements. For example, the translation APIs generally do not translate the attributes of elements that define a text, such as alt and title attributes of IMG elements. You can translate them via this command. You can now move elements. Move command is available for the element subject. It is used to move elements relative to a reference element. For example, let's move the featured image of this post above the title. Our target element is the element that shows the featured image, since we want to move it. Our reference element is the post title, since we want to move the image relative to it. As the location, let's select before, because we want to show the featured image just before the title. When we refresh the page in the Visual Inspector, we can see that the featured image is moved to the target location. It is now possible to use the values defined in JSON data when creating conditions in the filters. There are three new condition properties that extract data from JSON. They are used to extract a date value, a numeric value, and a text value. Let's see an example. I want to check a date defined in JSON data. First, let's select the element that stores the JSON data. Let's beautify this JSON to easily understand it. We'll use an online JSON beautifier. Okay, the JSON structure is easily visible now. Date published field stores the date we want. Because the text of the target element contains the JSON, we enter text as the attribute name. For the JSON path, we enter the path for the date published field. As the fixed date, let's enter 1 day after the found date to make the condition command meet its condition. To be able to see if the condition command works as expected, let's define an action command that will make the title uppercase when the condition is met. Let's test a post via the tester page. The condition is met and the title is now uppercase. Now let's change the target date to a date that is older than the found date so that the condition is not met. Let's save the settings and test the post again. The condition is not met in this case, as expected. This was the date value. You can also extract numeric and text values from JSON data to use number-related and text-related condition commands. Embedding social media posts has always been a hard-to-do thing in the plugin. Well, not anymore. It is just as easy as checking a checkbox which already comes pre-checked when creating new sites. Let's see an example. This post has many social media posts in it. There's a tweet, a YouTube video, a GIF from Imager, a Vimeo video, an Instagram post, and the TikTok video. Currently, these would not be rendered correctly on the front end of the website if we crawl the posts automatically in the background. That is because when crawling the posts automatically in the background, there is no logged-in admin account. Now, let's enable embed social media posts and other media settings. When we do this, HTML code that is considered dangerous by WordPress will be tried to be safely converted to shortcodes, which makes social media posts iframe elements from trusted domains, and HTML5 video and audio players display correctly on the front end. The trusted domains include 70 plus domains such as YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. Okay, let's test the settings again. The media code is converted to shortcodes as it can be seen in the test results. Now let's crawl the post manually to see how the media is displayed on the front end. We can see that the media is rendered correctly. We can see the tweet, YouTube video, Imager GIF, Vimeo video, Instagram post, and TikTok video. Great! Again, for new sites, you do not need to do anything as this setting is already enabled when you create a new site. It is now much easier to work with JSON. The plugin now has two new HTML manipulation options that are used to convert JSON to HTML automatically. When you check the newly added Convert JSON to HTML automatically settings checkbox, the plugin tries to detect JSON data in the page's source code and convert each JSON data to HTML. Let's enable this setting. This is the current state of the page. Let's reload it. As you can see, there are two new containers, each of which contains HTML elements that represent JSON data. You can select these elements, just like other elements, to use them in the other settings. For example, the post title is available here. We can select it in the post title selector setting. Now let's look at the other setting, which is Convert JSON to HTML setting. If the plugin cannot automatically detect certain JSON data, you can use this setting to select that JSON data so that the plugin converts it to HTML. Also, if you do not want all the JSON data detected by the automatic conversion setting, you can selectively convert JSON data via this setting. Let's inspect the source code of the target post page. There is a JSON string here, which I want to convert to HTML. It is defined in the head element. Let's write a CSS selector for it. When we click the test button, we can see the HTML equivalent of the JSON data. We can also see it in the visual inspector. There are also two new action commands for converting JSON to HTML. They are available for the properties that output JSON. There are two new properties that can be used to retrieve JSON from an element, which are attribute value as JSON and text as JSON attributes. When you select one of these attributes, the JSON to HTML conversion commands are available for selection. Let's use the text as JSON attribute. First, let's see Convert to HTML automatically command. Let's use the CSS selector we previously created. As expected, it is converted to HTML and appended to the source code of the page. This command has two other options, which are only field paths and unnecessary field paths options. Let's see what they are used for. First, let's beautify the JSON string so that we can easily find the paths for the fields we want or do not want. Okay, it is easier to see now. Let's say we only want to convert the author field to HTML. To do that, we enter that field's path into the only field paths option. Let's see the HTML now. Great! Only the author field is converted to HTML and other fields are discarded. The unnecessary field paths option is used to define the fields that should not be converted to HTML. Let's say we do not want the author field. Also, let's remove the image field. Great, the fields other than the author and image are converted to HTML. Now let's see the other command, which is convert to HTML command. With this command, you can define the HTML template yourself. To quickly remember how a template is defined, you can click the information button of the option. Also, you can examine the documentation for more information and examples. Okay, let's create a template. Let's retrieve the headline from the JSON and put it into a div element. We can see the div element in the Visual Inspector. Now let's retrieve the author name. You can copy its path from the JSON beautifier tool. Also, let's give an ID to our div element. Again, we can see it in the Visual Inspector as expected. Let's now retrieve this image URL. The image field defines an array, so we will define a loop in the template to retrieve all the URLs defined in the image field. We can use a wildcard character to retrieve all the items of the array. Let's close our WCC item shortcode. Now, inside this shortcode, we can use the WCC item shortcode again. The shortcode now points to the current item of the loop, which is a relative image URL. Let's define an img element and assign the current image URL as its src attributes value. Also, let's turn the relative URL into an absolute URL. Let's reload the page in the Visual Inspector. Great, we can see the image. We have successfully extracted the image URL from JSON and converted it to an img element. Let's say we want this image to be below the title of the post. To do that, we can use the move command. The element we want to move has the ID of images, as we defined in our HTML template. We want to move it relative to the title of the post, so our reference element will be the title of the post. Let's refresh the Visual Inspector. Perfect. The image is now below the title. You can now make a request to a URL and use its response. This is an advanced feature. To demonstrate it, I created 3 filters. Let's see them one by one. In the first example, we will retrieve the current temperature from a free meteorology API and insert it into the post content. As you can see, I have added temperature selector for the post content selector setting. Let's test it. It says the temperature was 18.7 degrees Celsius when this post was crawled. The selected element's text is 18.7 degrees Celsius. The final text is created by using the template option of the options box. Okay, let's see how the temperature is retrieved from the API. We first create an anchor element whose href attribute contains the API URL. Then we use make command of request subject to select the created anchor element and use its href attribute as the request URL. Then we convert the response, which is in JSON format, to HTML. Let me show you the command definitions. This is the anchor element for the API URL. As you can see, the response is in JSON. In the make command, we simply point to the created anchor element and make a GET request to it. We define a container element ID. This ID is assigned to the element that contains the response of the request. Next, we add a convert to HTML command. When the response is JSON, the response element contains the JSON string in a P element. We give that P element's text to this command as JSON data. Then we define our HTML template. In the template, we define a P element with the ID of temperature. This element contains the temperature and its unit as its text. Let's see the visual inspector. This is the response retrieved from the API. This is the HTML element created via the convert to HTML command. As you can see, it contains the temperature value and its unit. Now we can select the element with the ID of temperature to retrieve the temperature with its unit. Let's save the settings and test them via the tester page. We can see the temperature information at the bottom of the post content. Perfect. In the second example, we will use OpenAI's API to generate an image via their DALL-E model by giving the post title as a prompt. Our goal is to create this image and add it below the post title. First, let's see the API reference to learn how to make an API request to create an image. We need to make a post request to this URL. Here, we see two request headers that need to be specified. Also, we need to define a post body in JSON format as shown here. Okay, we first create an anchor element that contains the API URL via the create command. Then we add a make command and select this API URL as the request URL. As the request method, we select post. Because we need the post title in the post body, we define a shortcode that will be replaced with the title of the post. Then we define the post body as specified in the API's documentation. As the prompt, we use the post title shortcode. We want the response to be added inside an element with the ID of DALL-E response. Finally, as specified in the documentation, we define the two request headers. Next, we add a convert to HTML command and give it the JSON data retrieved as the response. We define a template that creates an IMG element whose src attributes value is the generated image's URL. The JSON path of the first image can be found in the API documentation by observing the sampled response. Finally, we add a move command to move the created image element after the title. Let's reload the page in the Visual Inspector to see a new image. We can select this image as the featured image of the post in the Featured Image Selector setting. In the previous examples, we retrieved JSON data as the response. Now let's see an example where the response is HTML. We will search eBay for the post title and add the first 3 search results to the post content. Let's see the result in the Visual Inspector. OK. Let's examine the commands used to achieve this. We first need to create a search URL where the search query is the post title. To do this, we select the post title as the request URL for the make command. Then, we use the options box to convert the post title into a search URL. We replace each space character in the title with a plus character to make it suitable for the search query part of the URL. Then, we define a template that outputs the search URL that uses the post title as its search query. When we go to the URL, we can see the search results. So, our search URL works as expected. We make a GET request to this URL and put the response into an element with the ID of related products response. We want the related products to be displayed in their own section, so we create that section by using the create command. We add this section at the bottom of the post content. We define an h2 element for the section's title. We also define an empty div element with the ID of related products. We will move the search results into this element. Next, we move each search result into the element with the ID of related products by defining a move command. Finally, we add a remove command to remove unnecessary elements existing in the search page's source code. Let me not remove the response container so that we can see it in the visual inspector. As you can see, the entire eBay page is added at the bottom of the target post page. The search results are not shown there because we moved them to the post content. We actually do not need to remove the response container. I removed it to make the target page's source code tidier and easier to work with. As it can be seen in the examples, the make command along with the create and move commands is a very powerful command. You can make requests to APIs and retrieve other pages' source codes. Also, if the target page is loaded via JavaScript by making a request to another URL, and if you can give that URL to the make command, you can retrieve the data that is loaded via AJAX. These are the most notable changes made in version 1.14 of WP Content Crawler. You can see the changelog in the documentation site to learn about all the changes. I hope you like these new features. Thanks for watching and see you in another WordPress Content Crawler video.